So the title of this show is called The Boomerang Effect. And in short, what it means is that what you do abroad, what you do to poor people within this country, especially blacks, what you do to Native Americans, what you've historically done to other cultures and other people. We can name so many: Vietnam, one of the, Libya, Syria, overthrowing governments, taking a president from Venezuela, bringing him here illegally, bombing men on boats who you say are cocaine distributors and calling them narco terrorists. All of those things that you do come back to you. This is a law. It's not anything that's magic or anything. And what it is that the United States, every step of the way, since it's been a country, started with slavery, started with Native Americans, and then started with expansion through war and violence. Is the type of country that leads to what's happening now to white people in liberal cities. Lately, we've seen it happen in Michigan, and it's a boomerang effect for what America is. A lot of people are saying that they never see the day that America would become fascist under Trump now, and see the day that they would lose their democracy. What I'm arguing here is that America has always been fascist because it's always been an imperialistic, white or Western supremacist country in which they think the rules don't apply to them, in which they think that we can allow poor people, poor white people in West Virginia, poor black people in the inner cities to live like trash and do nothing about it. But we continue to spend trillions on war, weapons manufacturing, and with lobbyists allowing gun control to be out of control in this country to the point where no one is safe. So the U.S. has always been a fascist country. And you know what they say, fuck around and find out. What I'm going to say is if you think the U.S. isn't fascist or hasn't always been fascist, fuck around or find out. And now people are fucking around and finding out because they're challenging Trump. And also they challenged Biden on some core things, and they found out. We can go back to Biden. He started the genocide in Israel. Well, not in Israel, in Palestine, funding that. And anyone who spoke out against that was terrorized as being anti-Semitic. That's an example of fucking around and finding out. That's an example of how there's a fascist strain in America where if you question anything that's lobbied by Israel, you're considered an enemy of the state. Also, with Biden, they had a war against Russia through Ukraine. And anyone who spoke out against this war was villainized, and this was vilified in this country. That's another example of how the U.S. is fascist. Once you say something that goes against what the powers that be and what the people that bank these wars, bank these genocides, bank the Cold War, bank anti-Russianism, bank whatever, once you do that, you start to see fascism. And you're seeing it again with Trump, which is worse. And I would say that it's worse because we're reaching a boiling point where our economy can't handle this war spending, and we're having problems in the U.S. If you look at the inflation, if you look at the cost of housing and everything, it's clear that within a year and a half or so, we're going to have another major crash, the likes of which we had in 2008, which is going to take a bailout. And this time around, there's no money that's going to be able to bail us out. We don't have trillions. But meanwhile, we're still spending trillions in military, spending billions to support Ukraine's lost war against Russia, and then billions to help the Israeli people kill Palestinian women and children. And when they're not killing them in the Gaza, they're stealing their land. So we have all of this money for everything. And then meanwhile, Trump is cutting the budget, cutting school, even cutting the IRS, cutting everything, but continuing with his adventures, going to Venezuela, talking about going to war with Iran. So all of this is leading to a point at which I think is what caused directly the issue with ICE and immigration. The issue with Trump deploying troops onto the streets of Minnesota. He did it in Washington, D.C. He threatened to do it in Chicago, and he's been doing this. And meanwhile, while he does this, companies aligned with him are getting a piece of the pie of the $100 million contract that this ICE thing is drawing in for Trump and his cronies, which is why they can pay masked men, most of who are right-wing goons, 50,000 bonuses to do this. So it serves two functions. It serves a way for Trump and for his bankers and for the American, I call it the arms complex, not just the military complex, to make money because they're running out of money to continue wars outside of the country. So they have to start a war in the country, and they have to choose a scapegoat. And unfortunately for the liberals and the white liberal cities, they are now the scapegoat. They're the scapegoat. People will say that they're on the fringes of society. They allow immigrants, they allow gays, they allow transgender, they allow all kinds of things. And we know that this is just scapegoating, because whenever an empire is in decline, they have to find a group of people to point to and say they're not American. So what Trump is doing is that he's making the rednecks, the people in the countryside, all of them who have legitimate reasons to be angry because the way the American economy is set up, the heartland doesn't have a good economy. So what they're going to do is blame black people, blame liberal people who live in cities, which are built off of banking and off of imperial wars, and find ways to say, oh, they're not real Americans, which is why what you're seeing with Trump, where he's going buck wild on Minnesota right now. He also has a bone to pick with Minnesota. I think it's because Tim Walz ran against him. But getting back on point, this is still a boomerang effect. And for liberals and people in big cities, and for Americans who go, I'm going to say this again, and for Americans who say they never thought they would see the day that their country becomes fascist and that they lose their democracy. You've never had a democracy. Blacks weren't allowed to vote until it was 1960s. And even after that, you haven't had a democracy because lobbyism controls your money. Also, you haven't had a democracy because you can't be a truly democratic country if you can sign off on wars like Vietnam, killing millions of people in Vietnam, killing people in Iraq based on false pretenses of weapons of mass destruction, going in and stealing Venezuela's oil. So to the liberals out there who are upset about what's happening, I'm going to use a phrase that Malcolm X used: the chickens are coming home to roost, but this time on you, because you sat down and you watched for decades, for hundreds of years now, people, now let's say decades, you've sat down for decades and watched the U.S. government spend tons and tons of money on war while you live in big cities that are being propped up by those wars. And you say, oh, we live in the great democracy. You never lived in a democracy. This is the boomerang coming back on you now, and it's coming hard. 2 people have been killed in Minnesota over the past couple of months, and actually more than that have probably been killed. And white people are now beginning to see what a monster their government is and has always been, but it was always on other people's turfs. And when it was in America, it was black boys killing each other with machine guns for drug sales, all of which is in a very complex way tied to the fact that black inner cities are used by the cartels with compliance of the government to be the selling place for drugs and to be the place where black people kill themselves so that you don't have to do it. But now that the war is on your turf, you say that something needs to be done and we need to go back to our democracy. And all of a sudden we've become fascist. I'll repeat it. Fascism is a latent part of America from the beginning. When you dispossess Native Americans, you use black labor, and you build your empire on war and misery. And now that you want there to be a change so that you're not suffering, that your liberal cities aren't suffering everything, you don't see that the picture is that there needs to be an overhaul of the whole American political and social and economic system. A lot of people don't like the word socialism, but I'm going to use it. The only way that all of this can stop is through solidarity of all Americans, rednecks, people who live in the major cities, anarchists, whoever you are, black people who think that nobody's on their side. If we don't come together and get rid of this lobbying system in which lobbyists like AIPAC, which represents Israel, or the war machine, or the prison complex, or the businessmen who make money off of committing war or actually invading Minnesota, until we all get in there and we grab our political system in which lobbyism is not going to be used and in which tax money is going to be used to either pay for or heavily subsidize education, medical care, infrastructure, health, mental care, until our money starts going there, instead of spending trillions to go to war with other countries and to pay the salaries and the health care and the schooling of people in Israel and also in Ukraine. That type of money needs to come back here. If we can pay for them, then we should pay for ourselves. And if we're not going to pay for those things for ourselves, if we're not going to pay for healthcare, for schooling, we don't want to pay for schooling. We're getting rid of the federal education system. We don't want to pay for medical care, like I said, mental health care, social infrastructure, roads, high-speed trains, and everything. If we don't invest in that, then we shouldn't be investing on wars which don't help America and actually put it in more danger. Here's the last thing I'm going to say about this boomerang effect. Many of these men that are out here shooting people bullying people were people that we were cheering when they went to Iraq, when they went to Afghanistan, and when they were killing people abroad. American soldiers are killers. They go abroad, and everybody, including the latte drinking liberals, says, yes, you're going to fight for freedom. You're going to Iran to do this to the Iranians. You're going to Libya to kill Gaddafi. You're going to Venezuela to yank Maduro out. These people have PTSD. And now when the economy is bad because of the actions that we sent them to do, Trump has to find new ways, and also his support, the banks and the military complex that supports him has to find ways to make money off of them again and off of the weapons, since they can't do it abroad because our economy can't handle it anymore. They're turning on you. This is the ultimate example of how the boomerang works. I don't know how we can solve this problem, because in the United States, people think socialism is a bad word. I'm going to say it again. Socialism is heavy subsidization, if not paying all of it, for education, for healthcare, for infrastructure, so that Americans can go to work and figure out how we can live together in harmony and in prosperity. Thank you.